For 6 years, I searched far and wide for the answers as to why I always seemed to mess things up. The conversations I was having, the explanations I was giving, the disagreements or the arguments that I'd find myself in, and the female interactions that would always end up with me walking away feeling awkward, confused, lost, defeated, and sometimes embarrassed. I could not work out for the life of me why I suck so much, even after reading article after article and book after book. And so if you're here watching this, it probably means that you too are one of those men who frequently stuff things up. So congratulations, and welcome to this place where we fuck up and we make mistakes. Now, the reality is that you're not the only one, and there's not one man on this earth who does not mess up from time to time. So here's the thing, it doesn't matter how often we mess up. That's not the problem we have. It's the stories and the lies that we get caught up telling ourselves that are the problem, not the fuck up itself. Now, these stories become the reason why we live a life of suffering. The suffering is what is going on in our minds that isn't actually reality. It's a story that we torture ourselves with. And as Byron Katie has described, you only suffer when you believe these stories to be true. When you don't, you won't suffer. But this is where the problem lies. We tell these stories every single day, and not a day goes past where we don't tell these stories, whether they're consciously or unconsciously. And once we've told them, we start to believe them that they're completely true. So arguing with reality. If you want your reality to be different than its current state, you may as well try to fly to the sun. It simply is not going to happen. And it's the exact same thing when you try and argue with the way reality is right now. Now, to be clear, I'm not talking about changing your reality, I'm talking about arguing with it. You can change your reality once you see it for the way it is right now, and arguing with it is where the suffering lies. If you were to become more aware of the stories that you tell yourself daily, you would probably start to notice that you are arguing with reality numerous times a day. I should be more confident. My kids should do XYZ. My wife or my partner should listen to me more. I should be making this much amount of money or have this job or this career. I shouldn't get so angry. These stories are always of what you want to do and what you want your reality to be different. So you're essentially arguing with reality. Now, it can be depressing thinking about these stories, and you're right, it is fucking depressing. And it's why so many men end up depressed. Everything we feel and suffer here is because of the fact that we are arguing with reality. Now, I was introduced to a woman of the name of Byron Katie, as I spoke about just before, and her book called Loving What Is. It's a remarkable discussion around the teachings of what she calls the work. Now, her teachings and her insights around the stories that we tell ourselves and the thoughts that we have cause an unfathomable quantum shift in our reality. You and I have thousands of stories that pass through our minds every single day. Most of them are just thoughts, passing as soon as the next one comes along. If a story gets a belief behind it, it can cause suffering. Now, these stories could be about the past, they could be about the present, or they could be about the future. They could be just about anything. They could be what we should or shouldn't be. They could be what we could or what we couldn't be, or simply why something is the way it is. Now, it can be extremely stressful when we attach a belief to these stories, especially because when we believe them to be true, it takes a lot for us to lose our belief in them. Now, years ago, when I was working on a mine site and living in an on-site camp, I shared a room with a guy that was about 20 years older than me. Whenever he left the room, he would always leave the door open, always. I couldn't understand why he would walk out and just not shut the door. I mean, how hard was it, right? Did he live in a tent? I repeated to myself on numerous occasions. Now, one evening, After a few months of shutting the door for him, I finally had enough and I decided to say something. So I got out of bed, I ran outside and shut the door behind me. And I couldn't see which way he'd gone, so I told myself, well, I'll say something when he gets back. So I turned around and I noticed that the door was open. At first, I couldn't understand why. I tried to close it again, but it wouldn't shut. And then I began to laugh as I realized that the lock was broken and the door could only be closed from the inside. So for the past 6 months, I had been stressing, causing myself this internal rage over this man's inability to shut the door, only to realize that the door was the problem, not him. I was so caught up in the story around this man not shutting the door that my complete reality around it was focused on this one outcome, blinding me to the truth. That's a key point, blinding me to the truth. Now, more than likely, the same thing must have been happening to him. He either knew the door didn't shut or he thought I never shut it. It's quite funny now I think about it. Now, there's this question, is it true? And this one simple question elevated my entire worldview. I started to question every part of reality and every story I had believed to be true. This simple question has set me free as I began to see the light. The first big realization occurred when the thought I would never be good enough came into my conscious awareness. I asked myself, is it true? Is it true that I'll never be good enough? I was just about to say yes when I got a clear answer from the voice within, no. And it was in that moment that I had a massive shift. It was here when I first experienced what it was like to shift my internal state. I fell to the ground and I had a sense of relief pouring out of me. Kneeling there on my hands and knees, it was like I dropped half my body weight. My shoulders became sore as if I just finished another one of those intense suppressive workouts that I used to do, punishing myself when I was younger. When this happened, I was beside my bed and somehow I fell asleep in this position. I'm not really sure how. I'm guessing it was just due to my sheer mental and emotional release. Now, I woke up the next day and I was smiling. I replayed the words in my mind, I am good enough, I am good enough, I'm good enough, for hours afterwards. And I didn't want to leave that moment. But what I did is I went and I started writing these things down. And what I came up with doing all of this and writing these things down for years on end, I started documenting and recording the things that I could then look back on and learn from afterwards, and I could even teach generations to come. Some of those things I look back on, the learnings and the lessons, I still teach to this day because it came through inspiration as I was writing and I knew something wasn't true and it came through and I had tears running down my eyes or whatever it was. And I had these little downloads and these little insights and realizations that come through, and there's still these one-liners that I use to this day. And so there's power in being able to write things down. Now, one of the ways to get these stories that we tell ourselves out of our own minds is to write them down. It's powerful to get it out. If you have 10 things to do in your mind, if you start going, I've got to do this, 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 that's a lot of things. Whereas if you just write them down, it's a nice list, easy, you can do it. So the same concept is with this. Write down, I believe I'm not good enough. And so you look at it, is that true? You might say yes. But then you go, is it really true? 100% sure, is it true? And the answer is always no. There's a little secret, the answer is always no. So you write down no. What is possible for you now that you know that that's not true? And it just opens up your world. It's such a simple little tool, a little technique, a little question, but it changes everything. So I want you to become conscious of the stories that you tell yourself. When you change your story, you change your life. And the way to do that is to write them down first, and then when you write them down, then you can start to change them. So let me know in the comments, what are some of the stories that you're telling yourself that you want to change? If you need any help with them, if you get stuck and they're not shifting, let me know and I'll help you. Now, if you like this video, again, there was a lot in it, you might have to go back and rewatch it, but like, subscribe, your support helps me, it helps a lot of the men that we reach, and I look forward to seeing you on the next video.